and welcome to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Rin.
And I'm Zac.
And today we are talking about the hero's journey. This is the first official episode in our structure series, so if you missed the introduction, go check that out from last week. But today we're talking about a classic story structure, the hero's journey. You probably learned about this in high school, maybe even middle school, probably high school. But if you didn't, we're here to remind you or to teach you new stuff.
For the first time.
For the first time. It's not reminding me you haven't learned it yet, but here we go.
Yeah, let's talk about the history of this stuff. Because the hero's journey, like the book in which the hero's journey was first published in the form that most of us are aware of, was published inside the late 40s. And it was originally conceptualized by Joseph Campbell as the generalization of many different myths from different cultures. Campbell was a literature professor. And that's an important thing to note because a lot of the controversy around the hero's journey has to do with the fact that he was a literature professor and not an anthropologist or a folklore professor. So we're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to come back to it at the very end after we've talked about everything having to do with this. I don't know if you had kooky English teachers like I did, but as is the case with literature teachers, for some reason, Campbell had this fixation on Sigmund Freud, which is probably some kind of bad joke somewhere since Freud was, all about those fixations. So he drew heavily on the work of Sigmund Freud as well as Carl Jung. So two of these Austrian psychologists that laid the groundwork for a lot of modern psychology today, even though most of their theories are never used. Something to keep in mind is that The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the book, claims that the hero's journey is the archetype for stories. And like we talked about inside the last episode, we are not here to sell you on the one true story structure. We are here to give you options.
That is why we are doing an episode on each story structure instead of one episode on one story structure and barely mentioning the others.
Yeah. The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the book that we're drawing a lot from today, had a big influence in Hollywood. And part of the reason for that is because corporate executives used it as a template to give to their directors as they were figuring out how to work their stories. You can see the story structure of The Hero with a Thousand Faces inside of the original Star Wars, as well as in many, many other movies.
Yeah. So what exactly is the hero's journey? In short, it's a story about a hero leaving their home to complete a quest and then returning home after the quest is complete. Zac says something about his high school literature teacher, which I feel like I should let Zac do this segment because I'm just talking about your literature teacher.
Yeah, so I had a literature professor who talked about A comes back to A, but is no longer A, which sounds so kooky, and it kind of was, but it really helped when you drew the diagram on the board where you start with A and then you draw a little circle and then you draw A back right next to it, but then you put a little X through it. That was how he described it. Was this, just like Rin said, this process where you leave, you change, and you come back. In The Hero with a Thousand Faces, this we talked about it in terms of 3 steps where it's you leave, you change, and you come back. But in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, it's 17 steps. And I don't know about you, but I don't have room in my brain to hold all 17 steps at once. So we're going to talk about a few of them. Perfect.
We're going to talk about one. Actually, we don't have them clearly noted, so we're just talking about a few of them. Yeah. So you first start out with familiar versus unknown worlds, and usually if you Google the hero's journey, you will come up with 8 of the same diagram at least, where you have a circle and there's a line near the top of the circle, not usually not bisecting the circle, but more in the top bit of the circle. This is where a video feed would be so helpful, but we don't publish the video feeds for our episodes. Sorry, guys.
We like to hide our really horrendous lighting.
It's so bad right now. I just heard my laugh on it. I think it got worse. And we we used to always record this in sound booths when the lighting was also so bad. Oh my god. It's okay. It's okay. We're doing great. But
If you
anyways.
really wanted to see our faces, guys, you just go follow us on Instagram and then you can see our faces as much as you want.
Exactly. Or you can find me on TikTok as well, because that's where I'm doing lots of stuff these days, apparently. But anyways. The hero's
Familiar
journey.
versus unknown worlds.
Exactly. So if you Google the hero's journey, in the top part of the circle diagram, you will have the cutoff for familiar world, and most of the circle is the unfamiliar world. And for the call to adventure, the hero starts at the top of the circle in the familiar world, and then you have the call to adventure, which pushes them down closer to the unfamiliar or unknown worlds.
Yeah, a lot of times, this is part of the reason why many of these stories start on a farm, because the farm is meant to be this familiar world. And oftentimes, the way that the call to adventure works is that there is some threat from the unknown world that comes into the known world and demands a response from the hero. And that is the call to adventure.
Yeah. There's some parts where some versions of the story where there's a refusal of the call. I haven't actually read A Hero with a Thousand Faces, so I'm actually not totally sure if it actually is an official part of the hero's journey.
It is.
It is? Okay, so that's when the hero says, no, I don't want to leave my safe, cozy, sweet farm. I'm going to stay here. And then something pushes them to, like, leave it.
Like their uncle dies.
Like their uncle dies. Exactly. Which is Star Wars, and my first thought was Spider-Man.
Yep.
Which is also Hero's Journey. Because, as we mentioned earlier, Hero with a Thousand Faces had a big influence in Hollywood. And also the comic book realm, which I guess is not technically Hollywood, but whatever. But anyways, the protagonists cross into an unknown world with the help of a mentor who belongs to the unknown world. So in Star Wars, this is when Obi-Wan Kenobi belongs to the unknown world, and he helps Luke by like giving him his father's lightsaber or whatever it is. It's been a long time since I've seen Star Wars, and I'm pretty sure it's Anakin's lightsaber that he gets. I hope I didn't just spoil Star Wars for someone.
That movie was published in 1977. I think the spoiler embargo has been lifted.
Okay, great. Oh my god. But after the protagonists cross into the unknown world with the help of the mentor, they confront lots of trials and gain some like friends and sidekicks along the way.
Yep. You get to, it's gathering the party, right? That's part of what, the whole D&D thing is based off of, is that you're picking up all of the people that you need in order to move through all those trials. But right before the climax, everybody is going to go away so that the main character has to confront the big bad alone. There are lots of different ways that authors do this. One of the ways that is very common is you kill the mentor, because then the mentor isn't around to help. And so the hero confronts the main challenge alone. They complete the challenge and they receive some kind of boon or blessing or magic item or something. They get this from the from overcoming the challenge. And after they get that boon, they return to the known world and they share it with their community. And that's the entire spiel.
Yeah. Yep. Some examples of this are Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, The Sword of Shannara, Moana. If you want a slightly more modern example, not any of those are super old, but they're kind of old, and we're getting to an age where people like watching movies more than reading, which is sad, but also we're gonna embrace storytelling in all its forms, even if reading is better. So there's nothing wrong with using the hero's journey to write your story. Like, it's okay and it's there to be a resource for you. But the way in which your story deviates from the journey will be what makes it fresh.
Yeah, because particularly fantasy is kind of saturated with hero's journey stories. I mean, we talked about The Lord of the Rings and the Sword of Shannara. The Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time is like one big hero's journey over and over and over again. I haven't read it. Please don't hate me, but I would venture to guess that The Way of Kings is exactly the same, where it's like we're going to do a hero's journey.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
a
we're up to.
hero's journey, but for like 5 people at once, which makes it a lot.
Yeah,
Specifically,
and that's what
Kaladin.
helps keep it. Yeah, that's what helps keeps it fresh, is that you have so many different characters who are going through it, so you get to move through different versions of what is known versus unknown. Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about gender and the hero's journey, because the hero's journey is a deeply gendered structure. And it is written with a male protagonist in mind and to reflect societal expectations about men. Academics have pointed out that you can't really solve this problem by just putting a woman into the middle of the hero's journey, because what is happening when you put a woman inside of the hero's journey is that she is acting out the part of a man rather than going through a journey that is reflective of her as a woman. And so if you are looking for resources to kind of expand and sort of, in queer theory, you talk about queering, queering things. So if you're looking to queer the hero's journey, I recommend The Heroine with 1,001 Faces by Maria Tatar, which we talked about last episode. This book is not the same structure but as the Hero with 1,000 Faces, where it's like, here is the one true structure for women inside of storytelling. Rather, it talks about some of the mythic tropes that include women, such as truth-telling and weaving and those sorts of things. So I highly recommend that book as a way of breaking out of that gender stereotype and that heritage of a deeply gendered story.
Yeah, I love that. I actually have not read either The Hero with 1,000 Faces or The Heroine with 1,001 Faces. But I love that we're addressing this because I think about gender a lot as a non-binary person, and like it's like the same concept of you can't just like give a woman the role of CEO and say, oh yes, this is the peak of feminism and this is the end of sexism, because that's just not how it works. Like you can't just put a woman in a man's role and expect it to be feminist or non-sexist. You have to actually deconstruct with the story or like the narrative that you're working within and then bring it back together.
Yeah, so that is the hero's journey. Congratulations.
You learned your first story structure from Quid Pros Quo. Woo!
Inside of the comments for this episode, we would love to hear about some of the ideas that you have for subverting the hero's journey. Because one of the things that you can do with every single one of these structures is you can tweak something and flip it around on its head in order to make it more interesting. So with the hero's journey, what would happen if instead of killing the mentor character, that the mentor became the villain? Like, how would that change the story? We want to hear your ideas. Put them in the comments.
Or email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. This has been Quid Pros Quo, not at gmail.com. And we will see you next week to talk about another story structure. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good week.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you like this episode, be sure to leave us a rating. And if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. For more episodes, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.